Old Charley Parkhurst was a legend, a driver of great renown. He was the toughest and the roughest whip in any western town. Charley had a way of doing things and doing 'em up brown. About the time that gold was struck up at the claim on Sutter's Mill, old Charley started driving rigs across the California hills. And there weren't no feller on the route that drove with half the skill. Why, Charley could drive 6 horses, same as you'd drive a team. And you'd swear you was on a railroad that had to be driv by steam. And old Charley would get you there on time, you bet, or else he'd bust a seam. He carried mail and passengers and started on the dot. And those horses of his, and so they say, was never known to trot, but they went at it in a gallop and kept the axles hot. If a tire had bust or something would just break down, old Charley would hustle round and patch her up and start off with a bound. And those wheels of that big coach of his'n scarce ever touched the ground. Now Charley didn't allow no fooling. And when Indians came in sight and arrows rattled at the stage, he drove with all his might. He'd holler, "Fellers, give it to 'em! I ain't got time to fight!" And the way them wheels would rattle and the way the dust would fly, why, you'd think a million cattle had stampeded and gone by. But the mail would get there just the same if the horses had to die. One cold, wet winter day, a passenger who was for Stockton bound climbed into the coach and sat down and said, "Can you get me to the town? Urgent government business. No time to sit around." Charley spit a big stream of tobacco juice, rolled his eyes, and said, "This wet weather ain't so good. Floods done swallowed the riverbed. But I'll get you there on time if the bridge holds out, or else they'll find us dead." Well, the going, it was rather rough with the mud and the slick and the slop. More than once, the doubtful passenger was convinced they'd have to stop. But the horses managed to pull the coach with old Charley up on top. And then the rig came round the bend and to the bridge made way. A torrential flood down below caused the span to pitch and sway. "Let's turn back," gulped the passenger, "and try another day." Old Charley wiped the rain from his face and tugged at his big hat. He looked over the edge 1,000 feet and then cussed and grinned and spat. He grabbed the reins and cracked the whip and to the team yelled, "Scat!" Down upon the rickety bridge the horses plunged with a mighty crash. Charley raised the whip o'erhead and came down with a stinging lash. "Get, you mangy brutes," he yelled, "or else we're sure to crash." And then the bridge timber started to creak and groan under the weight of coach and team, and boards started to break loose and fall into the flooding stream. But Charley just made it safely across as the main supporting beam broke in two with a thunderous clap and went tumbling 1,000 feet down the muddy mountainside into the churning deep. "That could have been us," squeaked the passenger as timid as a sheep. Charley just reined in the team, slowing them to a trot. He grinned and finally said at last, "Don't reckon, 'cause I'm the best they ever got, and I aim to get you there on time. We'd have been late if we had dropped." Floods weren't the only thing that might aggravate a whip. There were gangs of thieves and outlaws that might spoil a passenger's trip. And more than once, old Charley Parkhurst had to give some thugs the slip. There was the time when his coach was carrying a strong box full of gold that he was to deliver to the bank straight from the mother lode. But an outlaw named Black Bart had laid an ambush in the road. When old Black Bart told Charley to throw down the gold from overhead, Charley Parkhurst whipped out a shotgun and threw down 2 barrels full of lead. Black Bart was wounded sorely, but he was glad to not be dead. Instead of a mortal wounding, Charley Parkhurst, that wild buck, had shot the notorious outlaw, old Black Bart, right in the butt. Consequently, his posterior was severely cut. Then there's another time when Charley's coach was carrying gold, and there was 5 masked bandits a-standing in the road, guns aimed and ready to shoot, ready to relieve him of his load. "Throw down the strong box, and nobody will get hurt." Charley could tell by that deep, scratchy voice it was an outlaw they called Sugarfoot. A-fearing for the women's safety, he threw the gold into the dirt. But then, as he saw those outlaws ride off to their hidden mountain lair, he called out from the driver's seat, "Take heed! You best beware! I'll be ready next time some buckshot for to share." And sure enough, There come a day when a bullet made of lead was more than old Sugarfoot bargained for when Charley shot him dead. They left him laying there in the road where he fell. Not a tear was shed. Charley drove stagecoaches for 20 years, more or less. He never lost a single passenger and only that one gold chest. As for whips, there was never one like him. Charley, he was the best. But then he retired to a lonely mountain spot. He lived by himself in a little mountain cabin, almost entirely forgot. He had a few friends who had come to see him, but not a terrible lot. One day, one of Charley's buddies came to call on him. He meant to check on his old friend, see how he was getting on. And when he arrived to see Charley in his little mountain home, he found Charley real bad off. To be sure, he's nearly gone. Why, he'd been laid up for weeks with fever, aches, and pains. But when his friend said he'd go to get help, Charley said 'twould be in vain. I ain't letting no quack doctor touch me, and don't you bring it up again. A few nights later, Charley Parkhurst breathed in, breathed out, and died, alone in his mountain cabin. Not one soul was by his side. They found his body a day later, curled up beneath a buffalo hide. And to prepare his remains for burial, his friends, they were summoned. And when they stripped him of his clothes, they had a surprise a-comin'. For they learned that he was a woman. Charlotte Parkhurst had lived a secret life among men. She was rough, tough, and hard, and she proved it time and again. And by her skill with a coach and whip, she was the best man that's ever been.